Tonight, Facebook's a hit with the olds, Google's plan to sell insurance, and why Edward Snowden thinks that the U.S. is creating a black market for cyber attacks. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 250 for January 9th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by lynda.com. Invest in yourself for 2015 with lynda.com. It has thousands of courses to help you learn new technology, business, and creative skills. For a free 10-day trial, visit lynda.com/TN2. That's LYNDA.com/TN and the number 2. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Sarah Lane, and let's get right into today's tech feed, shall we? A new survey from the Pew Research Center, they love doing their surveys there, conducted back in September of 2014, and based on the 81% of American adults who use the internet, shows that Facebook's growth has slowed, but the level of user engagement on the network has actually increased, especially with the older set. Specifically, more than half of online adults 65 and older now use Facebook, which represents 31% of all seniors. Other interesting data from the survey, 52% of online adults now say they use 2 or more social media sites. That's a pretty big jump from just 42% back in 2013. And about half of younger adults, that's ages 18 to 29, say that they use Instagram. Now, of the total Instagram user base, that it's quite a great engagement, 49% are on the network every single day. In the world of Pinterest, somewhat unsurprisingly, women still rule that network. 42% of online women are on the site, compared with just 13% of online men. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Twitter wants to make money when people read a tweet that may have originated on Twitter, even if the person is reading that tweet somewhere else on the internet. People familiar with the matter tell the Journal that the company will sell ads within streams of tweets on other publishers' apps and websites, and that the company already laid out its strategy to media buyers in a presentation at CES this week. So Google's been offering its Compare auto insurance shopping site in the UK for a couple of years now. The New York Times is now reporting that the same feature may come to the US soon, with sources claiming that Google recently formed a partnership with the insurance comparison shopping site CompareNow.com. Ellen Carney, who's an analyst at Forrester Research, also says that the company is now licensed to sell insurance in more than half of the US. Now, because the insurance industry is very highly regulated, the way it'll work is that users go to a site, like Google in this case, enter some of their personal details, and then they get rates from various insurers. When they decide to buy, the site, Google in this case, would collect a referral fee from the insurance company, but the site also has to be licensed to sell insurance on behalf of the companies that give them quotes. Heads up to Apple users. InfoWorld is passing along a report from German tech news site Heise today, hope I'm saying that right, that a glitch in OS X Yosemite can expose private details of Apple Mail users, stuff like IP addresses, to spammers or phishers or online tracking companies. So here's what's going on. Spotlight Search indexes emails received via Apple Mail, or it can anyway. And when you're searching on a Mac, Spotlight shows previews of those emails and then automatically loads external images linked in HTML email. Spotlight loads those files even if a user has switched off the Load Remote Content in Messages option in the Mail app, and loads those files when it shows previews of unopened emails that went straight to a junk folder. Now, if you're wondering, how do I avoid this issue? By unchecking the Mail and Messages box for Spotlight in your system preferences, that should do the trick, at least for now. All right, we mentioned we were going to be talking about Edward Snowden and some of his latest thinkings and findings on privacy issues. And there's no one better to help me get through what I sometimes find to be very complicated subject matter than our very own Steve Gibson, host of Security Now. Hey, Steve, happy Friday.
Hey, Sarah, great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. All right, so there's PBS show Nova. Many of us are familiar with it. Recently released transcripts of an interview that it conducted with NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, kind of on the state of cybersecurity, where he thinks things are going, what he thinks the biggest issues are. So what about this surprised you? This interview, or this transcript rather, was taken, I believe, from last June. So there's certainly huge security issues and breaches that have happened since then. Obviously, they wouldn't have been discussed in this particular interview, but what stood out to you? We've heard so much from Snowden at this point.
Yeah, it was sort of funny because his central thesis seems to be that the U.S., the United States, should be more careful than he feels the United States is being in being a prime mover or a major actor in the cyber attack side of things. His argument is that, and he has a sort of a strange analogy in this where he talks about, well, our bank is much bigger than their banks, and if you had backdoors in all banks, then we have more to lose because more money is in our bank. And okay, first of all, that the analogy seems like sort of odd. And
Right.
the overall feeling I had was that he just sort of, it's almost like he had to come up with interview content. I found myself wondering, how much he really believes this, because, my sense is that the whole cyber issue is happening globally. And while it's true that, we and I guess probably Israel are believed to be behind Stuxnet, which, famously attacked the Iranian nuclear enrichment program in order to slow it down. He uses that as an example of that put the world on guard that the U.S. was going to be very proactive in launching cyber attacks, and it's sort of like it's sort of a spin on the glass houses argument. Don't throw stones if you're in a glass house. Well, so his argument is our network infrastructure throughout the U.S. is so creaky and full of holes and insecure and arguably insecurable. I mean, very difficult to come back and fix everything retroactively after all the code's been written and the people who know how it works are, gone off to other things. He's arguing that we shouldn't be attacking anybody as actively as we apparently are when we're as vulnerable as we are. And it's like, well, okay, duh.
Well, sure, but
I don't think we're instigating it. We know that China has and Russia have been, especially China has been has been believed to be responsible for attacks for many years, well before Stuxnet even happened. That there's been all kinds of industrial espionage. Documents have been exfiltrated from major companies, from aerospace companies and the government. So I don't know. It just sort of feels like he's gotten in the habit now of poking at the U.S. Law enforcement agencies, obviously, particularly the NSA, and that this is sort of more of the same, and he needed some content.
Snowden also touches on the idea of security researchers that find vulnerabilities, potentially very large ones, but then want to get money for these findings instead of reporting them to the appropriate parties, manufacturers. There's sort of a black market for fixes that a company's not going to come up with themselves. Does Snowden feel that is? I mean, there would be no way to regulate something like that, is there?
No, and in fact, you probably covered this on your own news reports. Kevin Mitnick, the famous hacker who's actually a friend of Leo's and mine. I mean, we know Kevin. He very loudly established a business to resell vulnerabilities that hackers and others discover, sort of being a middleman escrow company. So the idea is that if you find a vulnerability and you want to cash in, you can say to Kevin, hey, here's a vulnerability in such and such an OS, and it allows this behavior. And so this is really a whole really gray area, because you obviously the vulnerability's value is that it's not known. And if it becomes known, then the manufacturer will fix it. So, there is this presumption in Kevin's promotional material that he's selling this to governments. And it's like whoever wants to pay the most money gets the vulnerability.
So what is your main takeaway from this latest, I was going to say info dump, but that sounds too much like a breach of the transcript from the Nova team and Snowden? He obviously has ideas about, hey, the U.S. has gaping holes all over the nation, of really potential infrastructure problems if somebody wants to attack us. And if we're going to go ahead and take down, a power plant in Iran, we should expect that there will be retaliation, and that's sort of the way things go. Is it a game of tennis? How do we? How does the behavior change?
I guess first of all, it is unfortunately absolutely true that security is a huge problem. We were at the beginning of the internet. We ran around like crazy and we hooked things up, and that is so showing no sign of slowing down or really getting better. We've seen, for example, with the Internet of Things stuff, already companies were creating their own systems because we don't have standards yet in place, and many of them were vulnerable. There are ways you could, use someone's light bulb to attack them and get into their network in their house. So the first thing is security is, the term I use on our podcast is porous. It's fundamentally our barriers are porous. And I like that word because it sort of implies that the more pressure you put on, the more openings you can find. And so with that foundation, then there is sort of an arms, sort of a mutually assured destruction, arms aiming at each other, aspect of this, where if countries are incented to attack, they can. And now that's true with like existing battlefield weapons or cyber weapons. So, the one thing that's different about cyber, and as we've seen, for example, with the famous recent Sony attack, is attribution is hard. Attribution is not hard if a missile has been launched, because we know we can track it backwards and find out exactly where it came from. But cyber attacks are tricky. So it may be that they're less subject to this notion of, well, if you don't attack us, we won't attack you, because in the real world you can tell where the attack came from. In the cyber world, not so much. So I sort of think that Edward had a chance to get his face on camera again, and Nova said, "Oh, let's interview." I guess I'm feeling a little Snowden fatigue at this point. It's like, okay, same old Edward.
It's so much of the information is really fascinating, but I think I'm kind of with you on that. Steve Gibson is the host of Security Now on the Twit Network. Of course, he and Leo record on Tuesdays. That's correct. One of these days is going to stick. Tuesdays.
I think maybe it's too late for it to stick, Sarah.
Right. I know. It's like
that's going to start falling out.
4.5 years. I tried. But thanks for joining me on actually my last show of TN2, Steve. And before we let you go,
don't memorize it now, because you'll no longer need the information.
Right, exactly. I just need to take a break at another job, and maybe I'll get my act together. But before we let you go and have a great weekend, remind folks where they can keep up with your work beyond Security Now.
grc.com is where all of my stuff is, and more good stuff coming in the future. I'm sitting here looking at code for Squirrel, and it is like one bug away from being ready to put up online. So I just got to track down why I'm not updating a variable that I expect. And so we're very close to having a demo of what may be a new logon technology to replace usernames and passwords, really. All
right. Love that. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right. Coming up on TN2, we got to look at Windows 10 new browser, Windows 10's new browser. Yeah, I got that right eventually. And kind of a darker theme, some new stuff going on, potentially anyway. These are leaked shots. And how far a man might go to save his beloved drone. You know, it's the new love affair, the modern love affair of society today. But first, we would like to thank lynda.com for sponsoring this episode of TN2. If you've never used lynda.com before, well, I don't know where you've been, because millions of people love it all over the world because it has over 4,500 courses, 4,500 courses on topics that can really help you in your career, personal development. Maybe, as Steve mentioned, you'd kind of like to know a little bit more about security tools. Maybe you're wanting to get into photography or web development. Some facet of business, even software training that you feel that you're going to need to know about, Microsoft Excel or WordPress, for example. You probably have some sort of a plan for yourself. Hey, we just had the new year. Everybody's got resolutions. We all want to be the best versions of ourselves. Maybe you want to get started with photography and maybe get some money, be able to sell your photography on a website or just improve the photos that you're already taking. Lynda.com courses like Photoshop CC Essential Training, iPhone and iPad photography with iOS 8, and Pixel Playground with Bert Monroy, people who have followed Leo and I over the years. They definitely know Bert Monroy. He is the Photoshop expert. In fact, that's something that's worth mentioning. Every single course on lynda.com is taught by a professional who is at the absolute top of their field. So you are truly getting the best information from the people who know it the best. You might have just a few minutes a day, maybe even less than that. Maybe you've got lots of time. Maybe you're in between jobs, or for whatever reason, you stay up late at night. Each course is structured so that you can learn at your own pace and take as much time or as much little time from start to finish to get through the course when you've got time. Do something good for yourself in 2015. Sign up for a free 10-day trial to lynda.com. Think of all the stuff you could watch over 10 entire days, completely free, by visiting lynda.com/TN2. That is unlimited access. Every single course on lynda.com will be at your fingertips, including access when you're on the go. Say you've got a little time sitting at the DMV, you could watch lynda.com courses on your iOS or your Android device as well. And new courses are added each week. So the content pool is simply growing, my friends. That's lynda.com/TN and the number 2, and try it free for 10 days. Go ahead. We challenge you to learn something new in 2015. And lynda.com is the way you can do it. Thanks so much to Lynda for sponsoring this episode of TN2. On to a few more stories that we're following today. Are you ready? All right, let's do this. Okay, I'd like to check back in with our friends at Lizard Squad. If you don't remember who they are, it's the group that took down Sony and Microsoft's gaming networks over the Christmas holiday. Then the group said that was just a marketing scheme for a new distributed denial of service tool that they wanted people to pay for, and that would basically knock pretty much any site or a person offline for hours or days at a time. Krebs on Security reports that this DDoS tool, called the Lizard Stressor, it does exist and is powered mostly by thousands of hacked home internet routers, the kind of routers that still have factory default usernames and passwords. And if you're looking at SSIDs in your neighborhood, you know that a lot of people still have those. Now, in the first few days of 2015, Krebs on Security itself was actually bumped offline by a series of big denial of service attacks, apparently coming from this same Lizard Squad. It's now reporting the botnet is not just home routers, mostly home routers, but also some commercial routers at universities and companies and other devices. Krebs on Security says that it's getting help from security researchers who have been working closely with law enforcement officials investigating the Lizard Squad and are working with law enforcement officials and ISPs to get the infected systems taken offline. Microsoft is getting ready for a brand new browser in Windows 10, and who's excited? Why not? It's always good to have something new. It's codenamed Spartan. We've talked about it on the past. And now we're starting to see leaked images of what may replace Internet Explorer. Chinese site CN Beta has published screenshots showing the simple interface of Spartan and the Cortana digital assistant integration. Spartan is also said to include digital inking support to share and annotate web pages, and deep Cortana integration in the address bar and throughout the browser. The Verge reports that Microsoft is planning to build both a light and a dark theme with color accents for Windows 10, citing sources familiar with the company's plans, and supposedly not unlike the UI of Windows Phone for anybody who's familiar with how that looks and feels. Microsoft is expected to unveil at least some of its Spartan plans and a mobile version of Windows 10 at a press event on January 21st. Finally, a very brave or a very stupid man named Zweir Spanger really loves his DJI Phantom 2 drone. You know, drones are all the rage these days. But he loves his drone so much that he risked his life to save his drone from a watery death. Okay, I'm being like a tiny bit dramatic here, but this is actually kind of cool. His own footage shows him jumping into the water. He sees that the drone is going down. He's got his coat on, so it's probably pretty cold outside. And, you know, a Phantom 2 is about $700, so I can't really say I blame him. Then again, I also pretty much think that any drone footage these days is fake. I don't know. I've been burned too many times, but you can decide that for yourself. And that is it for this edition of Tech News Tonight, a Friday edition. Woo! Subscribe to the show at twit.tv/TN2. You can watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And of course, if you've got feedback, you can write us at tn2@twit.tv. Now, starting on Monday and every weekday, we've also got our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. This happens to be my very last Tech News Tonight show. For anybody who's not familiar, I am handing over the reins of this show to Megan Maroney. If you don't know her yet, you will love her soon. But thanks to everybody who's been so supportive of my time here on the show. 250 episodes in the can, brothers and sisters. It's been really fun, and hope you all have a really nice weekend.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.